too tall for me.
I can lower it. I just wanted to see how it went.
It's okay.
And
I'm okay. Okay. I thought actually Trey looked okay from it. It might have even made him look taller. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. I'll have I'll have my dad be a runner. Okay. 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 Cause you get your steps in that way. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I think so. Obviously, the hardest part for me was condensing everything into a presentation because in our 3 intensive days there, I have 45 pages of notes and slides, and so it was 3 very intensive days. And so we're going to try and cover as much as we can. But I'd like to start by everyone just introducing yourself and where you're from, and maybe share why you wanted to go on this trip in the first place. Not all at once. Go for it, Kelly. It should be. It's green. If it's green.
Green. Okay. Is it green now? Yeah, okay, there we go. It was green, but nothing was coming out. I'm Kelly Allen. Hello. I am from this church family, and I actually grew up in El Paso, and the border was a very, very different thing when I lived there in the, mid to late 80s. I mean, I've crossed that border many, many times without having to do anything other than say American and walk on by. So I just wanted to see what things were like now in the borderlands and how that has changed. And it was quite a learning experience.
Yeah, I would second that. My name's Tom Parker, and I'm from Cedar Rapids. I'm Presbyterian. And my reason for going is that I wanted to be informed about the border and not take any kind of filter that might come through CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. I didn't trust any of it. I wanted to hear it and see it for myself and learn and understand, and I think that happened. So.
I'll also add that Tom's wife, Christy, came with us too, who couldn't be here this morning.
I am Lori Forbes, and I'm from Lone Tree. Go to United Presbyterian Church in Lone Tree. They've really spoken why I went to. It was just time to go see it, to have a better understanding of it, to know how to go out and really just speak truth and trust as to what's going on down there.
I'm David Feldman. I'm Sarah's favorite dad. And I would agree with all those things. And also, Sarah's invitation was powerful for me. When your daughter invites you along, you figure you better go. Because I think she'll probably choose my nursing home one day.
We flew from, some of us from Des Moines, some of us from Moline, and we ended up having a delay in Dallas. We were going to go Dallas to El Paso. So we had an unexpected overnight in Dallas, and had an early flight Tuesday morning to get into El Paso. And so we didn't want to miss anything because it was so compact. And so in order to fit everything in, they added our first morning session and tacked it on after dinner. So the first day was really, really long. We were in the classroom most of the day in different workshops hearing from different people. But they started the day by telling us that Presbyterians have always been on the border. There are 6 sites from Tijuana to Brownsville, and in 2008 is when the narrative really started to change. In 2008, a stray bullet from one of the drug cartels in Juarez went into El Paso, like went into downtown El Paso. And they said that's kind of really when the narrative started to change and shift, and talking about how unsafe it is and how, it just changed everything for them. But they said for regular people, the reality was if you were in a cartel, then you were high risk. But for regular people, their risk was like any normal big city. So time went on, and in 2018, Tres Rios Presbytery, which is the presbytery that has El Paso, started raising money to start a new Peace USA ministry. And Ibarra, which is another organization, started to come into existence at about that same time. And so they were working alongside one another, and now together they offer these border encounters for people to come and visit the border. Leo, I think we can go to the next slide. Ibarra is, this is our lovely group. You'll see on the far right is Marta Pomeroy, who many of you remember from her time here with us. She's the border coordinator for Tres Rios Presbytery for their foundation. And then on the far left is John Nelson. John Nelson is a Presbyterian in El Paso. He's been a pastor there for a long time. He's now retired. We discovered on the first day
That he and I were in seminary together. He and I were at Princeton together.
So small world. And then do you two want to share your connection while we're sharing connections?
Well, while we were in Dallas and we didn't have any place to go eat, Dave and I shared a dinner of vending machine chips and pie. I don't even know what we got to.
The Days Inn.
At the Days Inn.
American provider.
And we sat out, we were talking, and next thing you know, we grew up like 10 miles apart. So, yeah.
I was a little ahead of her.
Not that far, but yeah.
So let's go to the next slide.
Let's go back to the other slide if we could, just for a moment. And,
Yep.
and I think we should mention that Christy is also an ordained pastor, and she's providing pulpit supply this morning. That's why she's not here.
Yeah.
She's
And
been here.
She's been here, yeah.
And if she's been here, you know that you want her to come back.
So next slide, Ibarra, they are a global borderland center for peace and transformation. And they have 2 offices, one in El Paso and one in Juarez. They offer immersive border encounters. They have support for migrant shelters. And they're a peace building center at a historic border crossing there in El Paso. And they were able to obtain this land. It seems like kind of a long story, if any of you remember it better than I do. At one point in the slides, we'll have a picture of their land right on the border. But then we went in coordination with Tres Rios Border Foundation, and their mission is to inspire, equip, and connect Peace USA congregations on the U.S.-Mexico border and beyond. We'll go ahead to the next slide. Ibarra means ford in a number of Semitic languages, signifying a natural place where a river is shallow enough to cross. And so until, within the past 20 years or so, the place where Ibarra is located was historically a place where people would go back and forth. And really, when you see Juarez and El Paso at the overlook, which I'll show you later, it just looks like one huge big city. You can barely see the wall going through, and that's how people kind of live there. A lot of them go back and forth every day. A lot of them have family on both sides of the border. Go back just one. So on the left they have a lot of murals around the campus, and then the middle picture is us enjoying a lunch of rice and beans and lots of really good food outside of the main building. And then the next picture is monarch butterflies that says migration is beautiful. Ibarra seeks to amplify unheard voices challenge narratives, and cultivate a more just and connected world.
We should probably say we were there the first week of December. While you were suffering here, we were in El Paso.
So I got a little pointer. Let's see if this works. Okay, so this is the wall right here. This is Juarez, Mexico. This is El Paso. And this is their future hopes for the Ibarra, compound. It's not a compound, but
Ministry. We call it ministry.
yes, that's a better word. Campus. This is better. Campus. And so they were right now. They just have kind of one building that's right here, and then a row of offices here. And then they acquired La Hacienda, which is a very historic building that they're hoping to remake and to use for a number of different ways. But then on the other side, what you can't see here, there are two buildings over here that formerly were Fort Bliss barracks. And they were able to purchase those at a very low price, and they're going to transform them into hopefully a center for peace and justice, like an international center for peace and justice. And their hope is that someday leaders from all countries will be able to meet there and gather there and learn more about the goings-on. But this is mainly where we spent most of our time, is right along here. I mean, we were literally 10 steps from the wall. We'll go to the next slide. So one of the workshops was by Michael DeBrule. He spent his whole career working for Border Patrol. He's kind of known as like a Southwest border expert. And what was interesting about Michael is that after he retired from his career in Border Patrol, I mean, he was in DC and like all kinds of big, Border Patrol happenings. Yeah, exactly. Kelly can speak for me. He was in very high positions in the government. He has interviewed hundreds of people on the southwest border, and what he's come across from that is that there are very few criminals. So when he retired, he volunteered to work at a migrant shelter in El Paso, which is the biggest shelter on the southwest border. It has a capacity of 750 people. At one point, ICE buses came multiple times a day with people. And this was located at the Sacred Heart Church in the second barrio. And the pastor had opened the shelter, and 1,000 people were there. And this was too much for the pastor to do by himself and his congregation. And so he approached Michael, because Michael had somewhat of a reputation, and asked if he would serve as the director of the shelter. And so he did that for quite a while until they actually didn't have a need for it anymore, and so they ended up closing that shelter. But anyone want to add anything about Michael?
Just a couple of things from some things that he shared with us. Honestly, most of the shelters in El Paso are closed. Like, the infrastructure for bringing migrants in is pretty much done in El Paso, and they've had to kind of shift their work to Mexico. But there were a couple of things that he shared with us that really, that have really stuck with me. Number one, his just absolute horror at some of the methods that have been used and are still being used. As someone that spent his entire career in border enforcement and working in the high ups in Department of Homeland, just absolutely appalled at masked agents being able to do some of the things that they're doing. And just hearing from someone that it's been a career doing that, to hear that from him, that this is not normal, that this is not okay. But another thing that he shared, and those of you that are in book group might remember that we had a conversation with William Lopez wrote a book called Reading the Heartland, and it contains the ICE raid that happened here in Mount Pleasant as one of the stories in the book. And we got a chance to Zoom with him after we read the book. And he talked a bit about how during the ICE raid here that folks were accompanying people to court cases, bringing their families there, and how that presence in the courtroom had such an impact, that community presence did. But one of the slides that he showed us was border flights, as far as like immigration flights, deportation flights. And most of the graph was pretty steady, but then for the past like couple of years, the border flights out of the country haven't really changed in quantity, but the amount of internal US movement has almost doubled, which means basically they're taking these people, they're taking them to a detention center, then they're flying them somewhere else to a detention center, flying them somewhere else to a detention center, and disappearing them within the United States before they ever get out of the country. And it just occurred to me like how hard it would be for family members to show up if there was even a court case, because most of the time people don't know where they are. They're just being disappeared within the country. And that was something that really kind of stuck with me and hit again in that conversation with book group.
I think the thing that Michael said was, this is not the Border Patrol that I grew up with.
A couple of facts that he told us were that, and some of the myths, but one truth is that in regards to drugs, 94% of drugs come through ports of entry. Another thing, he talked a lot about the recent administrations. The big, beautiful bill gave ICE $45 billion. But he also said that $49 billion are paid into Medicare every year by foreign-born workers. And then during, I think, the last couple of years of Biden's administration, they were having about 8,000 border encounters every day. So an encounter means that someone has come to the border either asking for asylum or an interview. And they were talking about how that's a lot, and that was overwhelming. They said the control numbers are very important. About 1,500 daily encounters at a port of entry is manageable. They have the resources for that to treat people with dignity, and it's more economic for them. But as of right now, the only legal way to enter the country is one, if you have a visa approved in your home country, or if you have parole, which then you're admitted with some conditions, or what they call an EWI, entered without inspection. So that's someone like going, climbing the fence or under the fence or crossing the border not at a port of entry. It used to be that in Juarez, they would have 3 time slots during the day, like 6 a.m., noon, and 3 p.m. or something like that, where you could sign up for an appointment to get your parole hearing or your asylum hearing. So on January 20th of this year, last year, they had the 6 a.m. appointments, and after that, they have allowed no asylum hearings since then. So now for almost a complete year, which has put more stress on Juarez and the shelters there, because people are just having to stay there and not even getting a chance to have an asylum hearing.
Yeah, they were using this CB1 app that people would sign up. That basically, since the administration took over, has now become only a self-deportation app. That's all you can sign up to do, is just self-deport.
So one of the things that I took away from Michael is that we can have an immigration system that is humane, fair, orderly, compassionate, and in which all parties benefit. That was his hope, and I think is still his hope. But let's go to the next slide.
The quality of presenter was just astounding. The quality of presenters were just astounding. And he was talking about back then that he He had just done, I think, an interview with CNN, and it was going to be aired sometime in December. I didn't see it. But that's the quality of speaker that we were getting.
We also heard from someone who worked in at least the Obama administration, maybe another one, who was an immigration policy and law expert. Yeah, so that tells you a little bit too about the type of people who are presenting to us. And I think all of them, they didn't emphasize Democrat or Republican. They talked about the humanity and the compassion that they try and exhibit there with the people that they meet. And whatever laws and systems come down to them, they just have to go with it and figure out how to do their work in the midst of that. This was just one of the slides that he showed us. Kind of one of the myths is the criminal migrant myth. And as you can see, that when the immigration population goes up, actually violent crime rate goes down. And that's quoted from the Marshall Project. Let's go to the next slide. So this just shows, that's really hard to see. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah.
Can we go back to the
Go back
previous
one slide.
slide? So yeah, thank you. So this is really important. Each one of those bars, that's how many border crossings have happened in a particular year. The red is Republican, the blue is Democrat. Okay, so you can see what happened in the last 4 years in the previous administration, that it almost tripled. No, it more than tripled. And we learned a lot about what Sarah touched on earlier, that they have to kind of roll with it, right? What the messaging that comes out, the political messaging that comes out, impacts the on-the-ground situation that has to be managed. And they had a really difficult situation because the Biden administration knew that the previous administration had just really created a lot of fear, and they wanted to overcome that. And it was COVID. Yes, thank you. It was COVID. So the message out of the White House became, we want to accept everybody. And that turned into quite a bit of chaos. And then as we all kind of knew, the outfall of that and the messaging that came out of several news organizations. So that was a big learning point for me. There were a couple of really key ones, and that one was one. So I realized whether it's Republican, Democrat, right, left, doesn't matter. What has to happen is the messaging has to line up with what the capabilities are. And if they don't, it's a big problem.
I think it should be said, though, also that, what was it, about a year before Biden was out, they came up with legislation, that they wanted to pass at that time. And the Democrats had given quite a lot to the Republicans at that point of what they wanted in that legislation. And then Trump shut it down because he wanted to run on it.
So I have here, let's go to the next slide. And the next. Okay, well, this was our classroom where we spent all day on Tuesday and a lot of the time on Thursday. But I have here in my notes, and this is coming from Sammy, who's the executive director of ABARA, and he said 10 years ago was the first movement of children and families, so in 2014. And this was shifting the dynamics on the border. He said in 2015 was the lowest number of encounters in 40 years, and yet we managed to work ourselves into a frenzy as a nation. Before, it was usually single men looking for work from Mexico, but 2014 was the first time that we started seeing women and children come, and that's when a lot of the caravans were coming as well. So now that children were involved, it really kind of shifted the way that they did things, because there are a lot of the shelters in Juarez now are for women and children. That's one of the ones that we visited. Sammy grew up in Jordan. Jordan is a country of refugees. For those of you that went on the Holy Land trip, you might remember that. But it was very interesting to hear his take on the way that he grew up in Jordan and the place that he lives now in El Paso. And he's noticed how the border was being framed and connecting it to fear. With him being born in Jordan, the narrative about Muslims and Arabs was, people that we've maybe never met, but those are people that he grew up with. And so he had a very different take on Muslims and Arabs. Sammy talked about the narrative of Israelis and Palestinians and how they both so strongly cling to the narrative and take away the humanity. But when you have a majority culture, it's not uncommon to know how the policies are affecting other people. Like if you're in the majority, you might not need to pay attention to how policies are affecting other people. He also said that now, other than Michael, who is an exception and doesn't work with Border Patrol anymore, but now Border Patrol won't meet with Ibarra. And they no longer, after the last Trump inauguration, they no longer allow any conversations with Border Patrol or ICE, or they're not able to visit ICE detention centers unless they have a pass to actually meet with someone who's detained. But his advice is to listen deeply to those you disagree with. Did you have anything to add? Okay.
I just wanted to let people know the whole reason we're all looking at our phones is because we were doing something with that QR code on the screen. We actually didn't sit there on our phones the whole time.
But he also compared Jordan in a way that, Jordan is a very poor country in a lot of ways, and refugees coming in, they just figure out a way to make it work. And he said that the less people have, sometimes the more they are willing to give. And I think that's definitely something we saw in Juarez especially. Let's go to the next slide. So Tuesday evening, we had a workshop with Marta. She led us in a workshop on theology and migration. Went through all kinds of Old Testament and New Testament scriptures, including the PCUSA Book of Confessions and even the Book of Order, and talked about how, how our faith, or how migrants have been a part of life since the beginning of time, and how our faith impacts the way that we think about them. But I think that might be like a whole other workshop for another day. Yeah. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this was a phone that was hanging on the wall in that main room, and the phone is from 1984, and they have it hanging there because it represents the last time the U.S. passed comprehensive immigration reform.
How many of you remember that phone? 475-8145.
Next slide. Okay, so part of our day included hearing stories from Luna and Becky. Luna grew up in Juarez. No, she grew up in El Paso. Let me look at my notes.
I think Luna is American but grew up in Juarez, and Becky is Mexican citizen.
And Luna is an intern for Ibarra. So Luna was born here, grew up in Juarez, and came back for school to El Paso. Becky, who I don't think I have a picture of, she was actually kind of forced out of her home in Juarez illegally. And so she ended up going to El Paso to live with her uncle, and do any of you want to share about them? Do you remember some of the stories that they told? I remember them starting their talk with saying that the U.S.-Mexico border was created violently. And she said that's a wound that kind of all of them still carry. Una herida abierta means open wound, but she said the open wound can also bleed in a positive way. And what they meant by that is that now their culture is so much richer because it's combining U.S. and Mexican cultures and holidays and food and all of that, and languages, and so many of them just share so much of that combination of culture and history.
82% of El Paso is Hispanic. And multiple speakers kept saying it's one of the safest cities in the United States. We keep hearing about how violent it is and how rough it is down there, and they all continue to affirm that it is one of the safest cities.
One of the things that I remember from hearing both of them is Luna talking about the power of the blue passport, and the fact that she is an American, and like she doesn't have to worry so much crossing the border. Like if she wants to sass a Border Patrol agent a little bit, she can because she has that blue passport. But Becky has to be so careful because anything that she does could risk her ability to come back and forth across the border.
She also joked that growing up, she used to say when she would cross the border, they would always tell the border agent, "We're going to Ross, dress for less," because there are a lot of Rosses in El Paso. She's like, "We're just going to Ross." That was like their answer for everything.
And I think also what hit me was that they're twin cities, you know, like Minneapolis and St. Paul, and suddenly you have a fence put in between.
Mm-hmm. Next slide. So on Wednesday, we traveled to Mexico. We started our day with Clara.
She's quite a driver.
And she spent a good amount of time talking with us about having dignity in our conversations with the people that we met there, that we would be encountering that day. So we loaded our van. We drove across the border. You can see the sign into Mexico. You can see all the traffic. Didn't have to show our passport or anything. Just drove right in, which I thought was strange. But apparently, if you go further, there are like checkpoints, and you actually have to show your passport. But next slide.
And Clara is an American, but she lives in Mexico.
She lives there? Oh. I didn't catch that. So we spent our morning at Ibarra has an office in Juarez as well, and this is their team. So Rosa and Danielle and Victoria, or Toya, is what she goes by, and they spent a lot of time talking to us about what Juarez has been experiencing and how they've been accepting people from Mexico and southern countries in Central America, and how they've responded to, I guess I don't have a year, in 2017 they had one shelter. By April 2018 they had 10. By 2021 they have 30. And basically when the caravans started coming, the Mexican government asked if they asked churches, NGOs, other organizations if they could provide some kind of shelter for folks. They're like, "We don't have any money to give you, but we need it." And a lot of them stepped up and worked in coordination, and I think that's why Juarez has been so successful in offering shelter and help to people.
I heard the number 50, that kind of 50 shelters had sprung up overnight. Now my hearing isn't so good anymore, but I thought Juarez was so impressive that the gate closed and shelters sprung up, church basements and everywhere. That was just astounding to me.
So Rosa actually was recruited by the United Nations to run a COVID-only shelter. So only people with COVID came to this shelter, and she did that for 2 years. And she says she never got COVID. But she was just incredible, and she told us more of her story.
I think Dan has a question.
Yes. Yeah.
My question is, the migrants coming from Central America up through Mexico, are they welcome in Juarez to stay? So there's a whole different attitude about the wall. That's kind of my question.
I mean, and it wasn't without struggle. Like Rosa shared some of the struggles with like schools and things like that that they'd had with the migrant community. But I think so. Yeah. Because yes, Rosa is also a migrant herself, and her story. All of us really, really impacted by Rosa's story.
Yeah.
But it wasn't without struggle, like to get to where Juarez has gotten to now. But things are getting better. Things are getting a lot better, and they are definitely working to welcome migrants in ways that we have not.
And I heard her say, they boldly say, Juarez is open to migrants.
Yeah.
You know, when we shut our gate tight, we have all the resources of the United States. We shut our gate tight. And the city of how many people? 800,000 people? More than that, million?
Yeah.
It
You know,
it's
says
over
Juarez is open to you.
Yeah. And they said like Tijuana, which was kind of in the same situation, they weren't able to have that coordination between, you know, different organizations in the city, and they haven't been as successful as keeping and maintaining shelters. Let's do the next slide.
I don't know how much more of her story you were going to go into, but she was deported from the Chicago area, what did you say, 9-10 years ago? She is just an astounding person. And what did we lose? You know, what did we lose? Holy cow. Here she was running the shelter, and it was like 200 families, wasn't it, in that COVID shelter? It was either 200 rooms or 200 families. And so folks came up sick. They put them in this shelter. And again, a sign of the United Nations is doing nothing. This was provided by the United Nations.
Well, and one of the things that she really focuses on now is taking care of and offering respite for people who are working in shelters, because she knew how hard it was for her. And so Ibarra, they do respite services for pastors and shelter leaders so that they can continue doing the work. Let's go to the next
Yeah,
slide.
I was just going to say one thing here too from Rosa, and just the situations that many of you might be involved with, but what I find so intriguing and just so heartwarming is she was deported, but she went to a place where she didn't have family, she didn't have anybody when she ended up in Juarez, but yet her heart was filled with love. I mean, she talks about deep places, but if you've ever had you've met any of these immigrant families or migrant families or refugee families, I am so amazed how they still love us. You know, their compassion and their love that remains even when they are treated without the dignity that they deserve. And Rosa is one of those.
Her children are still in the States.
And her husband.
And, well, yeah, and her recent husband. I'm not sure what happened to the first husband, whether that came after the deportation or before.
So her now husband is an ER doctor in Chicago, and they meet all over the world because he can go visit her there, but she can't visit him here. So they go on lots of vacations together and meet up around the world. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this shows the average length of stay. I don't know if we really need to get into all of this, but it does show, so they're beginning in 2019. The average length of stay in a shelter was up to 3 years. In 2023, 15 days to 9 months inside shelters to correctly wait for an appointment under the CPB1 or CBP1 app. And then you'll see, January 20th, now they're staying as long as they need to. Next slide. Maybe you've heard of this. The Beast, La Bestia, is a train that people jump on. It's a cargo train that they jump on to make their way up to Juarez, essentially. They have to pay someone to ride it. Rosa shared with us a story about a mom with 2 of her kids who were on the train, and it started derailing, and somehow the mom fell off and ended up losing her leg, and one of the children died. And Rosa helped with the funeral for that in Juarez. And so those are the kind of things we think about that we don't think about that happen along the journey.
There's so much exploitation of these migrants as they come up through the Darien and through La Bestia or other ways that they come through. So much exploitation.
So Rosa said the average person is paying $14,000 to a coyote to get through this area, and this area is one of the most densest jungles in the world. And the only thing that goes through there is a freight train. So that's why they're all on it, and it's their only ticket to go north. And a lot of them, she told in a private conversation I had with her, she told me about a family in northern Venezuela who had been their village had been terrorized by machete-wielding cartel people, and they were just coming through door by door. They just ran out the back door as fast as this one family, as fast as they could. They grabbed a bottle of water and their kids and ran for this train. So that's the kind of fear that's motivating them to come north. It's not to smuggle drugs. That's kind of, I think, one of the things.
She also said a few stops along the way, there will be ladies who make sandwiches and lunch bags and toss them up to people on the train.
Lynn's got a question.
Well, I read a book recently, but it was before the Trump administration came to power, about the borderland. And one thing that struck me was about how many people got injured with broken legs and so forth by trying to climb across the walls. And I just wondered, with this change now, of if that's still happening, or they just think they need to wait it out in Juarez.
Before you answer that, I just think about how serious things would have to be before you'd pull your kids onto this.
Yeah.
It's still happening. There are things happening, but what they shared with us, they took us, and I think a slide's going to come to a place where what they're doing now is going further into mountainous areas. So they're actually trying to cross what we were told, and you guys correct me if I have this wrong, but they're going to try to cross without legal entry is actually more dangerous, because the wall right now is so patrolled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I tell them what happened?
Oh, well, we could tell them. We actually did see a border crossing. Trey told some of them about this last week, I think. But we did witness a border, crossing without
inspection.
without inspection.
And apparently, up in kind of in the hills of Juarez, the cartels have lookouts and they're monitoring it all. And what we saw there were kind of like a gully, and there were 3 guys that ran towards the fence as we were driving by. This was further away from downtown.
We were on our way to a place you're going to see in a little bit.
And one guy just cut it out, 2 guys went through, and the one guy came back, and they were videotaping it all, I guess, to prove to the cartel that they got these 2 guys. So those are the people that we don't want coming into our country.
Right. So part of that $14,000, the Quixotes, if you pay $14,000, we will get you to the razor wire. So the razor wire, there are two rolls of razor wire on the ground, and their contract, if you will, there were actually 3 guys. 2 of them were Quixotes, or Quixote agents, and one was a person who had paid $14,000. And that person, their mission was to get them through the razor wire. So they cut the first razor wire, ran up, and one of the guys stayed behind and filmed it. The other guy went up, cut the razor wire again, and got the guy through. So now they get their $14,000. They've earned their $14,000, and they're videotaping it for the Quiotes. So the Quiotes now have made this promise to this person, we're going to get you to the second razor wire. But what happens to that guy after that? He has a 15-foot wall in front of him and more razor wire. They just snatch him up and take him over and deport him.
Which is kind of astounding because I was amazed by the number of pickup trucks that went by a bar. I mean, they're patrolling this thing like crazy now. They have surveillance equipment. Maybe you're going to touch on that, but surveillance equipment that somebody said, well, you can read a book 2 miles from here with that camera up there, and understand that everything that you're saying is being recorded or heard.
Well, and one thing also that I noticed, that we all probably noticed, is that after the guy went through the fence, you didn't see a whole bunch of Border Patrol trucks like chasing after them. Nobody was chasing them down because they know where they're going. They know where they are. They know where they're going. They've got enough of this surveillance equipment there to know exactly what's happening, and they'll find them at their destination.
But our van, we were all just kind of in shock, I think. We were like, did that just happen right in front of us? So one of the joys of our trip and our visit to Juarez was that this is a shelter. It's a converted church, and then on the right there is a gymnasium type area. And there were a group of about, 10 or 15 women who had completed like a nail tech design class. And they were having a graduation that day. And so we got to attend their graduation, and we thought it would be a little bit awkward because we didn't know any of them and they didn't know us. But later we learned that they absolutely were overjoyed that there were people that came and clapped for them when they graduated. And then we enjoyed a lunch of Little Caesars pizza and pasta and so many different kinds of potato chips. It was very carb heavy. But it was really
Apparently
fun.
it's a thing, though.
Yeah. And so then the next slide.
Cap and gown and the whole 9 yards. It was really
special.
Precious.
Yeah.
And the teacher was a refugee herself and had this skill, and she said, I want to teach this to other people so that they'll have some sort of means for maybe making a living, which is apparently pretty lucrative. So she did that, and the shelter sponsored a little program, so that's what they were graduating from.
So does that imply that these migrants that are in there do spin out and start businesses and stuff? And so the whole economy gets...
I think that's the hope. That's the hope that they can.
Not yet, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I think that was behind the whole Biden thing, is immigrants are economic boon. They bring all their wanting to start something, wanting to get something going.
Yeah, well, or that if they actually eventually can come into the United States, they are prepared to maybe do something to help keep moving forward instead of then still depending on the government. I think is also a hope of it.
This is where they lived at the shelter. So both sides are kind of casitas, and they have like a general living area and then bedrooms. And you'll see it's colorful, and there's a little playground on the other. They said this is one of the nicer shelters, and this was a women and children only shelter.
Can I talk about the woman who was across from us? Mm-hmm. Are we running out of time? We'll be out by 3 o'clock. We'll be out by 3 o'clock without any trouble. So this is the first time we're together. So it's kind of fun to hear what they're remembering, and I'm kind of to that stage of life. Was I there? Did I have a good time? So to be refreshed of what they're saying is really good. But this woman, the instructor for that class, was sitting across from us, and with the help of, I can't remember her name, who was
Toya was helping translate, I know.
Toya was interpreting for us. And she was telling us her story. She had, 3 kids, I think. One was, had rented a house, and her son had a job that he was out bringing home some money. And came out of a very bad situation. She's a single mother, and so she wanted to marry a farmer from Iowa. Well, I guess didn't have to be from Iowa. She wanted to marry a farmer, and Kelly mentioned farmersonly.com.
We recommended Farmers Only to her, so we'll see if she can find her farmer, her Midwestern farmer.
Okay, so then we visited a Mexican Revolutionary Museum. This was right on the border. Next slide. This was...
A historian.
What is his name? So that's Clara. But Clara translated for him, and he talked a lot about the history there, and like there were hotels in El Paso where they would rent out the top floor and people would watch the war from the top floors of hotels in El Paso. Daniel, good for you. Okay, next slide. So this was actually where you see the wall behind, over there.
That was the privately built wall.
Yes. Okay, and so then my left foot is in the United States and my right foot is in Mexico because they actually built the wall around that memorial there. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see a little video of a common occurrence in the borderlands.
Actually, not a week. Wow. Ahora, como platicar un poco más de dónde estamos.
So you see a little bit of the wall. And Daniel's talking to us, but it was a little hard to concentrate because of all the action going on the other side of the wall. You see some of the lights up on the wall. And it kind of got to the point where that was just common. Like, I remember a time on Thursday where it was quiet, and I was like, there's no helicopters. The next slide.
Which it sounds like it's the common occurrence now in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we had dinner in downtown Juarez, or like the city center in Juarez. That was the big church that's there, and you see some of the vendor tents. We actually ate at a Chinese restaurant.
It was like Mexican, Chinese, American, it was a little bit of everything.
You
It was
can go to the
good. It
next
was really
slide.
good.
And then we walked back into El Paso by foot. You can see some of the fun lights down in Juarez, and then walking back over, you pay a quarter and enter the turnstile, and then you walk to the top of the bridge where there were two Border Patrol agents, and basically they're there to keep they'll turn anyone away that they want to, because once you step over that line, then you can claim asylum. And so then once we got to the end of the bridge, then we went through like customs and security and all of that, which was a breeze for us because, again, blue passport. And
if you've ever been through a customs checkpoint, that's exactly what it's like.
next slide. That shows all the traffic going back into El Paso at the end of the day. That's El Paso in the background. You can ignore the Spanish on this because, but on Thursday morning we visited a healing garden, and this was a memorial to the 23 victims of the El Paso Walmart shooting back in, I think, 2019. And this was really like a somber time, and because what we learned was that the shooter came from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, traveled specifically to El Paso because it had a high Hispanic population, and just open fired. It was just a really meaning.
Picked that Walmart because there were known migrants that would be there.
Yeah, that's the one that, people that are crossing the border to shop will most often end up at. It's that Walmart.
Next slide. Yeah, so it lists each person's name and I think how old they were. Next slide. There's a mural on the back.
It was very powerful to be there. Yeah, I personally had not thought about the shooting past, the first week that it happened, and it was in the news cycle and everything like that, but being there was just really impactful.
I might tie it together with one of the first things they shared with us, to coming full circle here then with why we're also there, is all of this really is about the narrative. How is the story told, and what do we hear, and how do we make that narrative be that positive one?
So on our last day, we went up to an overlook on a mountain in El Paso. So you can see, this is kind of downtown El Paso. You can't really see the wall, but this is kind of where it goes through there. This is a new building being built in Juarez, which looked super sketchy.
I think weren't we told it was they thought it was some sort of security building?
Oh, yes, that's why
Observation
it's
and
so tall, an
security
observation.
building.
So you can see, like, it just looks like one big city.
And New Mexico is not very far either. When we were standing next to the border wall, the helicopter was actually coming in from the New Mexico side of the United States. So it really is like a tri-city metro area.
Next slide. I don't really remember what that is.
That's the pass.
Okay, yes.
Yeah,
That's like the most historic part.
The spot that the property that Ibarra owns is so historic to the El Paso area. The hacienda was a mill during, I believe, the Civil War. Like, this spot was important to the Mexican-American War. This is a very, very historic spot. So it's very, significant that they're trying to do this on this particular piece of property in downtown El Paso.
And they've been crossing the Rio Grande there since, what'd they say, the 1500s?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
1500s.
But now there's a border wall.
Yeah. Next slide. That's just a picture of the wall, kind of right where we were. This is one of the observation towers that has the really powerful cameras and listening devices.
Of course, they're probably listening this morning too.
It's just such an eyesore through the entire area. It really is.
Next slide. So this was inside the hacienda. That was Nate. Just kind of cool to see the history there.
And the emphasis that they're placing on this peacemaking astounded me also. And I think it was at this point that he says, we all have to stop othering. And that's a word to me as well as anyone. We have to stop saying those folks, those Republicans, those Democrats. We have to stop othering. We're in this together.
And Marta and I were talking one day, and she was saying that, it might not happen in her lifetime, but she feels so strongly that if the wall were ever to start coming down, that it would start there on the Ibarra property. Next slide. So this was kind of a makeshift museum inside the hacienda. These were all items that they found on the Ibarra property when they were kind of rebuilding it. This is made out of, this is like a ladder made out of rebar. And you can, when you're coming to cross, you can pay like $1,000 to use it.
Rent it ultimately?
Yeah. So you see the little hooks, they fling it up, hook it over the wall, and climb over. This was a backpack that was found, and inside this backpack they found a plane ticket from Turkey, which I thought was super interesting, and something that I didn't think about, that people would be flying from Turkey to Mexico or somewhere and then making their way up.
And we can't see it very well, but one of those caps is a John Deere cap. And Tom used to work for John Deere, so especially meaningful picture for Tom.
And next slide. This was a piece of art. It's a foot that they made out of recycled ladders, rebar ladders. This is our building. There's Lori and Tom out in front, and this is where we met most of the time. You can see the wall is right behind it. And then these are the cats. I think there's like 17 or 18 in that picture alone. But
That wasn't all of them.
This is the door to where the little apartment where the maintenance guy works, and he feeds them every night, so that's why they're all there.
And there are no mice.
And this was that Marta's office door? So
Oh, that's the kitchen.
yeah.
That goes into the
Oh,
kitchen
right.
area.
Yes, and casina, kitchen. But they have these different colors, and they all mean something significant, which I don't have it written down, but
I have the card in my purse, but
yeah. But we'll keep going. Next slide. Here's a pretty picture of the El Paso Mountains on our way to the airport. Next slide. So I think, one thing that I took from, I think what Sammy said at the end of one of the days is that there's a Lifeway poll in 2022 that said only 20% of Christians in the U.S. list the Bible as the source for their views about immigration. And they said here in Juarez, it's hard to have a conversation with someone who doesn't mention that their faith has sustained them through their journey and their story. And I think we learned that as well, that their faith plays such a role in everything about their life. Anything in closing? Any questions? Matt?
Do you think one of the problems is how hard it is and the length of time it takes to become a citizen of the United States?
Yes.
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 I don't get it. I don't.
That's pretty.
So the question, just so for the recording, is wondering if part of the problem is how long it takes and how expensive the process is to become a citizen in the United States.
Definitely is.
And you cited that the last immigration reform was in 1984.
That's right. Yeah, that therein lies the problem. Yep. And the answer to your question. Yep.
Anyone else?
They do. They are.
It doesn't really pay to have a lot of people coming into the country if we don't have immigration reform. So we have to make a way for those who've been here a long time and are working and participating in our society, that they can become citizens without paying hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever they want for it.
I was just going to say too. I think that while we were there, and it's been said, it was never the Republicans and the Democrats. It was really about what can we do to make this work. I mean, how do we make this work for all people?
And there's shared blame. I mean, no one has, blue or red, there's shared blame here.
Humanity and dignity. Those two words were with me. Humanity and dignity. Mm-hmm. Everybody deserves that.
Anything else? I know that there are some folks in our presbytery who are planning a trip in the next year or two. So if any of you are interested in going, there might be another opportunity. But it was definitely very eye-opening and life-changing for the way that I think about things.
I think all of us would echo that.
Great job, Sarah.
Great job, team. Thanks.